Hello, this is John from caveofprogramming.com. In this tutorial we're going to look at extending the DAO pattern to handle multiple databases in a kind of plug and drop kind of a way. Apologies for the amount of time it's taken me to get this tutorial out, but as you may be able to tell, I've switched to using a Mac, and it's taken me a while to get to grips with recording videos and transferring my data and all that kind of thing. So let's just take a quick look at the application we've developed so far in this series of tutorials. And it's this very simple thing here. And I can just add a name and a password, and the details from that form are stored in a transfer object, which is this kind of person bean here. And we can add those person records to the database or query them from the database using this person DAO object here, database access object. And I've also, although I didn't implement it, I've created a log DAO object as well. I just want to point out that in a real application, your database might be potentially huge. And in here, I've created methods like getPeople, for example. And in a real application, you probably wouldn't want to query all the records from a table all at once, at least in many cases. But so instead of that, you probably want to have methods that they could be called, for example, getPeople, but they might allow you to supply I don't know, some kind of query string that would then translate into some SQL that would get you a particular subset of records from your database. So you don't necessarily want to have methods that bring all the records back in a real life situation, unless it's just a very small database. Now the question here is, how can we change this so that it could work with multiple databases? Because we might want to switch to using an Oracle database, or who knows, you might have an application that uses different databases at different times, or it might try to use a MySQL database, but it might switch to SQLite if it's not available, or it might query LDAP, who knows. And the first step here is, well, this person DAO and then also the log DAO, were I to implement it, have to be coded for particular databases, because usually, even though I wrote this in using SQL and JDBC, that there are some differences between Oracle SQL and MySQL SQL, for example. Each relational database has a slightly different interpretation of SQL. So you probably have to write one of these objects for every different relational database. And if you're using something completely different, like a non-relational database, like text files or LDAP or something, Active Directory, who knows, then you obviously you'll need to completely rewrite the thing. But the interface shouldn't change. So it should still have the same methods like getPeople and addPerson and so on. That's the point of it, that the implementation can change, but the interface shouldn't change. So the first step here in adding support for a new database in this application is to recognize the fact that this is specific to MySQL. So let's just right-click this class name, person DAO, and go to refactor rename, and let's rename it to MySQL person DAO, which isn't a very elegant name, but it'll have to do. And the same for log DAO. I'm going to this isn't implemented, but I'm going to right-click and go to refactor rename, and I'm going to call this MySQL log DAO. Now, I want to use the same interface with a different database, so that the next step is to extract that interface so that I can implement it for different databases. So I'm in Eclipse here, and this is going to be slightly different if you're using a different IDE, but most major IDEs will let you do this. I'm going to right-click and go to Source, or maybe it's Refactor, yeah, and go to Extract Interface, and I'll call this interface Person DAO. I'm going to select all the methods in my MySQL Person DAO and click OK, I don't really need to declare interface methods as abstract, although I don't think it makes any difference. I'm not sure. And then I'll click OK. And that creates for us a interface person DAO that just codifies the idea of a person DAO. And MySQL person DAO is now a specific implementation of this interface. Let's do the same for the log one. So I go to MySQL log DAO and I just right click that and go to refactor extract interface, and I call this log DAO. Select all the methods and click OK. And now, of course, we can go ahead and implement different DAOs. So I could right click here and go to right click here on the model package and go to new class. I can have an Oracle person DAO and click finish, and I say that that implements person DAO, and I just click the error and add unimplemented methods, and now I have to implement these methods, which I'm not going to do here, but if you wanted it to work you'd have to do that. And the same again for the log one. So I right click the package, go to new class, and let's say Oracle log DAO for example, click finish. Don't know if there's a quicker way to do this. Implements log DAO, and just click the error, add unimplemented methods, and I can implement that one. And now I've got DAO objects that are for like two different databases in this case, and I want to organize those somehow. If I look at my DAO factory, this has really become, because I used refactor, it's become a MySQL DAO factory. So let's also abstract away the idea of a DAO factory. Let's right click this and go to refactor rename, and I'm going to call this my SQL DAO factory. Then I'm going to right click it again and go to refactor extract interface, and I'm going to call the interface DAO factory, as you might expect. And I think that I should see some methods in here, shouldn't I? I'm not really sure what's gone wrong there. Let's try that again. Oh, it's because they're static. Well, you see, another thing that I'm going to have to do, which I forgot, was I'm not going to use static methods here anymore, because if I look at how I've been using this, if I go to the controller, I've been using the class name here, and then something like get person DAO. But what I want to do is I want to have different objects here, and I can have a MySQL DAO factory and an Oracle DAO factory. So particular objects that are going to be returned from a factory class, and you'll see how that works. But basically the upshot is I'm going to get rid of these static declarations here, get rid of those, and I'm going to right click this and go to source, refactor extract interface, and now I can extract the DAO factory interface. That MySQL with the D, 4 capital letters in a row, looks really ugly, but never mind. Click select all on the methods, click OK. And so now I've got this MySQL DAO factory that is just one possible implementation of DAO factory. And another little refinement that I could do, I'll show you in a minute actually, because what I also want to do is let's create a parallel class now, an Oracle DAO factory. So let's right click the model, and I could use different packages for these different, like the Oracle ones and the MySQL ones. I could use different sub packages on the model, but for the moment I'll just leave that. I'm just going to right click and go to new class, and I'm going to call this Oracle DAO factory, and click finish, and all the DAO factories will implement DAO factory, that interface, and I add the unimplemented methods. And the implementation of this is actually now pretty simple, because for person DAO it returns a new Oracle person DAO, and of course for log DAO I just need to return new log, new Oracle person DAO. So I'm just returning the Oracle specific DAOs. So let's save that. What did I do wrong here? Oh, that should be log. So I've abstracted everything away behind interfaces, and I've created MySQL and Oracle specific versions of them. And the one last little touch that I'm going to use here, is kind of a nice touch, is I'm going to change this DAO factory, the interface, because I want it to have a method that can return these different particular kinds of factories. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this into an abstract class, and I'm going to say let's go to DAO factory. Well, I used to have an F3 key, but now I'm not sure if it will work, so let's just click down here, DAO factory. I just want to go to the class, and I'm going to change this. I'm going to say public abstract class DAO factory. Now if I save that, I'll get some errors. I'm going to declare these methods abstract, so anything that implements this class must implement these methods. Let's save that. And do we have any more errors? Yeah. So now instead of saying implements DAO factory, I need to say extends DAO factory. And these are now implementing abstract methods. And we should have, I think, one more error here in MySQL DAO factory. There we go. I don't know why the errors aren't showing up quite as immediately as they should. And now if I go to my DAO factory, my last little touch here for this tutorial is I'm going to give this a public static method which is going to return a DAO factory of some kind, and that's going to take an int. Let's call it type, and if I can remember where on this Hungarian Mac keyboard are my brackets, this method can now return me a DAO factory of the right type, so that I can use this abstract class to get the right kind of DAO factory. So to do that, let's declare a couple of constants. I could use any num here, but it's more ingrained to use static constants. Let's say public static final int MySQL, and I'll put it in uppercase letters to make it clear that this is a constant, equals naught, let's say, and public static final int Oracle equals 1, let's say. And then in this DAO factory method, actually, oh yeah, I see I've mangled that. That's meant to be the return type, and it should be called get, something like get factory would do the trick. I think get factory is probably fine, or get DAO factory, whatever you like really. And then let's say here switch type, which is the parameter that I've just passed in there, and find the right bracket on my keyboard. Then I can say case MySQL return new my MySQL DAO factory, which is a particular implementation of this abstract class, like that. Or I can say case Oracle return new Oracle DAO factory, of course, Oracle DAO factory. And I could have a default in there, which could be, who knows, throw an exception, or return null, or do whatever you feel really. So now I can use all this stuff, and I can go to my controller, and the way that I'd use that is, so I was using this DAO factory class. Previously I was saying DAO factory.getPersonDAO. Now what I say is DAO factory up here. This is the abstract class, remember. DAO factory dot get. Oh yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. So this is static DAO factory. So I need to say DAO factory dot get factory. I'm not really sure why this isn't working. Let's do control command O, control shift O, whatever it is on your machine, to add the imports. And oh yeah, I need to. This is public and static, which is good. And so I think that should work. I think I should be able to say get factory up here. Let's say type naught for MySQL and save and add the import. Well, it's not liking this, which is, I'm putting it in the wrong place. Okay, it's been a long day, although it's only like 1 or something. So I'm just going to cut this, put this in the right place. So yeah, before I use this person DAO, I just need to get it. So let's say I don't really need to have this private variable up here. Actually, let's just make this a local variable. And in a minute, I'm just going to recap this because I know this has been a hell of a lot of stuff to take in. So I've got person. I want a person DAO is the basic problem here, and I want it to be a MySQL person DAO. So the first step is I'm going to get the right kind of DAO factory. So let's paste that in, and that will return a DAO factory implementation. Let's call it factory or whatever you like, and just add the import there. Maybe there we go. And so now, because I've said naught, actually I shouldn't say naught, I should say DAO factory, use the constant because I made it public, dot MySQL. Now we're in business. So now I've got a factory that can give me MySQL DAOs, and I can say here factory dot get person DAO finally, and now finally I'm using it, and hopefully it should work as before. I hardly dare test it. Let's just run it quickly. There are some errors in it, but weirdly I don't know where. So well, I think everything's fine, and I'm probably going to leave it here because I seem to have some problem where I'm not seeing the error icons on this Mac in Eclipse on the left, and at the moment I don't know why. I could try project clean, see if that gets me anywhere. Just clean it. It's always helpful. And there's no error icons here. There's just a few warning icons. Let's save this and try to run it. No, well, it's being difficult, and I don't know why, but never mind. All this code looks correct. Oh, it's the tests. Here we go. I was just being blind. Possibly you were screaming at me to look at the tests or not. Just to get this working, I'm just gonna comment this out for the moment. I think let's just put a massive multi-line comment in. I feel that this tutorial has gone on long enough now, but let's just finish it off quickly. So I'm gonna try to remember where the asterisk is on my Mac, and I think I've succeeded. There we go. Now save it. Keep my fingers crossed. Is it going to let me run it? Let's see. Why is the error icon still there? Oh, no, we're in business. So let's try adding someone. I'll add someone called Mike with a password of Z and click create user. And we go back here, and yeah, so it's working. So that's good. So that was quite a lot of stuff. you might need to go over it again, but basically you just have to think that first you need your specialized DAO objects. So instead of having like a person DAO, you'd have a MySQL person DAO, Oracle person DAO, whatever kinds of databases you need. Then if you're having different kinds of objects like that, you want to have some kind of either a parent class or an interface, and in this case you make it an interface. Then you do the same with the factory. You have specialized factories. Get rid of the static thing there, because you're going to use actual objects of those factories to get your DAOs. And you can make them extend a single abstract class called DAO factory. And the advantage of doing that is that you give it abstract methods that the child classes have to implement. And the advantage of that is that you can then declare these constants and have a single implemented method in this abstract class that allows you to get the particular different kinds of factories, and that's all there is to it. You can make this even more elaborate, but I've just no desire to get into it. And I don't think I've ever needed, to be honest, to even go this far with it. But you could have another layer. You could have like maybe like a relational database factory and a hierarchical database factory. I don't know. You could have more stuff going on in there. But I think that's enough for this tutorial, and that's enough of the DAO pattern. Probably what I'm going to do in the next tutorial is I'm going to talk a bit about having a structure to your application where you store stuff in memory and you just write to a database when you click like a save button or something. And we're going to use this model class, because I actually created a class called model. The way I started off these tutorials was by actually creating a particular class called model. I slightly regret doing that, because although I am going to use it here, I think this isn't very typical, really. It gives you a very nice, elegant sort of start-off point where you're creating your view and your model. But the reality is that you could have multiple, really these are just packages. The view, the model and the controller are packages. If any of them is going to be a single class, it's probably the controller followed by the view, but none of them may be single classes. So in your MVC implementation, it's not a given that you'll have a single class called model, but I am going to use one in this series of tutorials, because I'm going to use that as a kind of place to store data in memory as an intermediate step to writing to the database, which is a common pattern. If you think of something like Microsoft Word or something, it doesn't write until you click the save button. So that's probably going to be in the next tutorial. That's it for this time, and I'll put this code, I'll make it downloadable from caveofprogramming.com, and I'll also upload it probably to udemy.com and maybe other places, I don't know. If you find this course useful, it is free, but I ask if you could possibly link to www.caveofprogramming.com somewhere. That'd be wonderful, because it'll give me better results in Google. And there'll be more of these coming soon. We'll look at some more design patterns. So join me again for the next tutorial, and until next time, happy coding.